Do you believe that somebody can go through hormone therapy? Can they change their gender if they're a child?
I think that's totally fine as long as everyone is consenting, as you agree with.
So L is our slang word for today, and I just wanted to chime in on the recent Penguin Z0 drama on his alleged quitting of his podcast because according to the internet, due to the extreme heat that he can't handle because of the extremely L take that he pulled out of from his butt cheeks on his debate with Sneako about the age of consent. And I want to get this out of the way first because in his latest response, he goes on by saying that his opinions doesn't really matter in the end of the day.
My opinion is not special, and my opinion isn't one that's pandering to any sides or catering to anything. It's literally just whatever's up here. I sit down for like 30 to 45 minutes on like a topic or like a video that I'm joking around about, and I talk about it. I am legitimately just an average, well, below average height guy who's about to turn 30.
Well, unfortunately, it does, Mr. Moist. With your level of influence, your takes will matter whether you like it or not. It's actually pretty awesome, and it's a privilege that not all people have, if you ask me. Because it's the thing that you've worked on for years, and everyone acknowledges that. And that's why this became bigger than it should be. Now, I do think that this affected him personally. Well, I could be wrong, but I know the feeling of being morally and technically right for the longest time and being wrong broke my heart. I couldn't accept that I was wrong, so there's a huge possibility of him feeling that around the corner. Now back to the debate, and feel free to share your thoughts on this. Now personally, I think Sneako is more in the wrong in their debate because of his initial stance of a fully brain-developed adult can marry a 17-year-old. But Mr. Moist took the bigger L, cause remember the saying that the bigger you are, the harder you'll fall? Because I think that's what happened here. Like, Mr. Moist has the moral high ground to begin with, and he has the divine take. So if he somehow messed it up, like my hair right now, he will crash much harder. So it was officially 1-1 now according to the internet. Hey, tie game. And after that announcement that Mr. Charlie is leaving his podcast, that sets the internet ablaze where they said, he can't handle the heat, what a bitch, huh, what a coward, oh. And that prompted Sneako to be the bigger man, and here's Sneako's winner's statement acting all high and mighty. So he said, MoistCr1TiKaL put out a statement saying he's quitting the internet after our debate, which he is not. For years, everyone has seen cancel culture attack me, and I have never quit. My advice is to never take a break and never show weakness. Keep your head up, brother. Well, in my opinion, he is still an idiot, saying all that shit about the age of consent of marriage. That's when this iconic clip erected.
What do you think the age of consent should be, Sneako?
This is not an important conversation.
You don't think f***ing kids are not as an important conversation? What do you think the age of consent should be? If you want to be consistent, you don't think anything updates, just tell us what you think it should be.
I think it should be at a developed age.
What is a developed age? If you had to set a law for it, what would you set it? What would you set it about?
It's a developed age.
No, answer the question, you f***ing pussy. Holy, you're such a cowardly stand up for what you believe in. If you actually are f***ing Muslim, you're actually Islamic, then stand up for your f***ing beliefs. Every other Muslim scholar online will do this. Do it. Stand tall on it. Don't act like a little in here trying to grill fucking XQC on fucking modern meta ethics or whatever if you won't even answer basic questions about your worldview. What should the age of consent be?
You see how
you want to answer the question? You see how he's gonna yap and not answer the question? I'm gonna ask the same thing when you're done. Go ahead. What was the age?
I just told you at a developed age.
Sneako thinks you should be able to 9-year-olds. That's what Sneako thinks, and he won't answer that question honestly. Or he's gonna have to give a different answer, in which case he's updated his morality, updated his views, and that's really uncomfortable for him. You don't have an answer to any of this shit, bro. Go back to that fucking corner in London where you're getting roasted by year 1 debaters on fucking Christianity. This is I don't know what the fuck you're doing in here.
So now we've established that Sneako is mostly a bumbling buffoon. He's still very opinionated, but most of the time, his opinions are not what you would call a sound reasoning per se. And the man who gutted him down, MoistCr1TiKaL, decided to debate him once again to shove his feet down Sneako's asshole once and for all and end his maniacal rampage. He defeated Sneako before, and most of the people are on Mr. Charlie's side, so what could go wrong? Well, everything. Because this debate is a really terrible idea. This shouldn't have happened in the first place. And at the beginning, you kind of feel that there's something wrong.
Okay, so then instead of let's take it away from like premarital sex. Would you feel comfortable marrying a 16-year-old? Like, would you meet a 16-year-old with romantic intent if you're in Europe and maybe marry a 16-year-old? Nothing sexual.
I probably wouldn't personally, because I don't think that I'd be on the same mental playing field. I like to have intellectual conversations. I like to be with women that are around my same age.
Yeah, I mean, that's checkmate right there. You could have easily made the argument that if you personally don't believe it, you shouldn't be forcing your beliefs or ideals to others, because he knows full well that pretty much anyone doesn't like that. It's morally incorrect, and I'll get into that later. But Sneako being Sneako, he will undoubtedly let his beliefs known and started setting the groundwork for his master plan, being super philosophical and scientifical, talking about what defines a child and an adult.
You do admit that that varies for most people, right? A lot of people don't move out of their parents' homes until they're 25, 26, 27. A lot of people don't.
There's nothing wrong with that.
A lot of people graduate high
whole.
school 16. A lot of people graduate high school 20. It's a huge variable. So to set that in stone is that this is when you're a kid and this is you're an adult, that doesn't apply to most people. So why would you define a kid and an adult if it doesn't apply to most people?
Because it needs to be defined. Otherwise, you can get into this really gray area where you, like a lot of the things you say, can be misconstrued as you wanting to have sex with a 15, 16-year-old.
Who construed that?
A lot of people, because, I mean,
I don't
in
think
your
anybody
clips
thinks
that
that.
I played in the
Most likely, everyone who heard you talk about the age of consent got that as you justifying having intercourse with an underdeveloped human being. And almost no one is sane enough to think that your take is right, because you even said it yourself earlier that for you personally, if it's below 18, it's too young for you. So I guess that answers your shit right there.
video, you were
no
saying like the age of maturity, the age of development, and then you use 16 and 17 in that clip.
So
like, for the age of marriage.
The definition of an adult is 18 years old.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fine establishment right there. Anything under 18 would classify as a kid. I think that's important.
Okay, but you're getting that from what? From personal experience, from the government, from the law? Because that's legally in America, that's when you become an adult, correct?
Yeah, legally. It
So
is.
you're following the government's definition of an adult.
I think there needs to be a definition, and that one's been around for a long time, and I think that's the one most people accept as the closest to, like, yeah, this is when you become an adult.
So at this point, the argument of our big man Moist is starting to show cracks there, because what he is saying is the age of consent is determined solely by the government. Well, technically true, but it seems like he doesn't really know why 18 is the age of consent.
Right, 200 years ago in the 1800s in America, the age of
Yeah, but we
marriage...
can't live like that. We're so much more advanced than that. Why would we play by those rules? Because at that point, are you going to start arguing that we should be able to start wedding 12-year-olds? Like, is 12 too young?
That's not the point. I'm saying, you're saying that the U.S. defined adult as 18. Well, I'm saying 200 years ago, the age of marriage in America was 10 and the UK was 7. Right, so if the government decides to change it, you're saying it's 18. If the government, maybe if Kamala Harris gets elected, then the new legal age of an adult is 25. And there could be reasons to say that. They graduated college, they don't leave the house until this age. Their brains don't develop until they're 25. Your frontal cortex is not fully developed until you're 25 years old. A lot of people aren't making serious money. They're not able to live independently. A lot of things that you could use to classify an adult don't happen for the new age American until 25 years old. So if Kamala Harris raised it to 25, would you then say that that's the new age? Would you agree with that?
I think that'd be totally understandable. Like, I think that's fine.
So
Like,
then does that make
if you
so then does that make anybody who sleeps with an under 25-year-old, does that now make them a pedophile?
No, I don't think necessarily that makes them a retroactive.
So then what's a
But it's an accepted definition of 18.
And Sneako here got all scientific about the brain being not fully developed until 25. Well, okay then, big guy, let's level the playing field. Now, I actually looked it up on why 18 is the general age of consent. It's because the people's brain's prefrontal cortex are around 80% upon reaching 18. Because you can see that the brain is starting to get mostly mature in the age of 16, but that's still too young. So it's like 18 is the borderline safe middle ground of being mentally stable. And even just a year below that, it's much more mentally unready and aren't capable of optimal rational thinking. And I'm also speaking from personal experience because I vividly remember the changes on how I think when I was 18 turning 19. I'm much more calm and collected, no more random frustrations and irrational decisions. It's like magic actually, but I didn't know that my brain was evolving that time. And I personally think that 18 is a little underbaked when it comes to the age of consent. And I think the perfect, pristine middle ground of the age of consent is 21, because at that point, statistically, your brain is a few years away from being complete and it's capable of making rational decisions.
Do you see why this is like a weird take to have though? Like I don't think you're coming at this from a place of you wanting to f a 15-year-old, are you? To go back to that question, is 12 too young? Do you think 12 is too young?
I think 12 is too young for me. I think 12 is too young for me. Yes.
Well, for you, do you think 12 is too young in general? I feel like that should be an easy answer.
12 is too young in general, correct? Because,
Okay.
yes.
And I don't
But
think you're coming at this from that
define,
angle.
but what you're saying, your definition of adult is not even the actual definition. Do you know what the definition of child is? Like anybody watching this can Google it. You can Google it too. The definition of child is somebody who has not reached puberty yet. That's the definition.
Yeah, and then you get into like the abibophile or whatever as opposed to file, and those are all.
I don't know. I have no idea what those terms are. I don't know what that is, but I'm saying that's the actual definition. When somebody reaches maturity, it's based off of biological and physical maturity.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
So
right
so
now-
so it varies for everybody. Adulthood is not something that you can set in stone because it's different for the entire world. Right? I moved out when I was 14. A lot of people don't move out until they're 25. I went through puberty when I was 17. A lot of people went through puberty when they were 13, 14, 15. It changes for everybody. So for you to say that this is the set in stone age and say you're a pedophile if it's under 18, and then if you're over 18, you're fine. Well, then that's a weird line that doesn't make sense. So you're going to say this person is a terrible person if they're 17 years old, 364 days, and right after that, they're good to go. Well, it changes for everybody. So we have to have something, a definition. We have to be
do.
realistic with
It's
everybody.
But
Well, we
there
don't.
is-
But you're saying we, but that's not even the case in the country we
Well-
live in.
Yeah, so their arguments are falling flat fast, especially Sneako, because he's arguing about what is the definition of adulthood and what is a child. And like I said before, that the age of consent is based on the mental maturity, not really physical maturity. And yeah, it's different for everyone, especially when you're a female and you reach peak physical maturity far earlier than males. Trust me. I know, I got punched by one, and she's just 2 years older than me and she's humongousaurus. But that doesn't mean that you're perfectly capable of performing rational decisions just yet. And here's where the argument shifted from the age of maturity to just consent.
We're talking globally. Let's just talk globally. Like, do you think it is okay for, and I'm not talking about just you specifically anymore, anyone. Do you think it's okay for anyone in their 20s, an adult, to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
And I want you guys to remember this part of the argument because Sneako is about to say something very important.
A 21-year-old, if there was a marriage where the father consented and the daughter consented, and it was both good on both families and they wanted to do it, why am I going to get involved? Why should we get the government involved? If everybody's consenting, if everybody's okay with it, if the parents are okay with it, if nobody's being harmed, if it's going to be okay, if they're both abiding by the rules and they're not hurting each other, why not?
Now remember this argument that if all party consents, it's perfectly fine to happen. Because that point will be the main point of this argument later.
But they're still, like, they're at best a sophomore in high school. They can't consent to something like that. Like, do you think
Okay, so now it's
16-year-old can
sophomore in
consent to
high
something
school
like that?
versus senior in high school. What's the difference? Like, what's the difference?
I'm just saying,
maturity-wise?
like, I'm giving you a perspective on where that age would be in life. Like, they can't consent to something like that.
If a 21-year-old got married to a 17-year-old who was almost 18, is that 21-year-old a pedophile?
I would say that is a morally bad thing to do for sure.
Not morally
Just-
bad. Not morally bad. Is that?
I wouldn't call them a.
So when does somebody become
a?
when does somebody become a pedophile?
I would say when you have this position, you are.
You're
in
not
your
answering the
20s,
question.
And you are. I'm explaining it.
Okay.
When you are in your 20s and you start preying upon someone who is still a child, a 15, 16, 14, anything under 18, a 21 and a 17-year-old.
But you still haven't specifically defined what a child is.
I did.
So then why? Okay, there you go. So if pedophile is love of children, and your definition of adult starts at 18, if the 21-year-old marries a 17-year-old who's turning 18 tomorrow, he is a pedophile based off your definition.
As I said, if he would wait, he would not be. Then yeah,
Well, not wait. Based off your
play ball with
definition, that person's
in that
a so-
position. There is no reason to not wait for the legally established, agreed upon definition of when you stop being a child.
Well, by definition, a pedophile is attracted to prepubescent individuals, which is most commonly in the age of 14 and below. Okay, sure, if the victim is 17, you're not a pedophile, but you know what else you're gonna be called with that shit? You will gain the titles of being a predator. See? Doesn't feel better to the ears now, does it? Because you are preying on individuals that aren't really capable yet of making rational decisions. So therefore, predator. So Sneako, being this pseudo-intellectual, tries to clarify Mr. Moist's beliefs, and to justify his point, he made incest as an example.
Tomorrow, if the US government legalized bestiality, if the government legalized incest, based off your logic, there'd be no reason why that's wrong. Can I ask you, Moist, do you think that incest is wrong?
Yes.
Why is incest wrong?
There is under no circumstances any excuse for anyone of the same bloodline to be romantic like that, by no means at all.
Why?
I really think it should be pretty obvious why.
I don't know why.
So
I'm asking
even
you. Why is incest wrong?
Incest is wrong because I believe that no family dynamic should ever include a sexual relation.
Why?
I don't think that, because it is not healthy. It is a bad thing to do. It is a horrible thing to subject someone to.
But why is it horrible? Because who told you that?
It's what I believe. And also, if you do have a child with your own kin, the child suffers.
Okay, but say it's two brothers, two gay brothers, Chris Tyson and other Chris Tyson and Chris. If they're two brothers and they decide to be in a no, genuine question. It's what you believe in. I want to figure out where your beliefs come from. You personally believe that?
My beliefs come from a place of what I believe to be moral, where I don't believe that anyone in the same family has any position to be romantic with one another. I don't think that's a
your
healthy
morality
dynamic.
comes from yourself?
My morality comes from like the world around me. I don't have.
Okay, so
brothers or
if the
sisters or
morality
anything like
comes
that.
from the
So-
world around you, then by your logic, if you lived in America in the 1800s where the age of 10 was okay, and where the age of 7 was okay in England just 200 years ago, if you followed the world around you, that would be okay. That was fine.
And it's not now because we've evolved past them.
Okay, so let me answer that. Incest is wrong because of inbreeding. It's very dangerous. Your offspring will have a higher chance of gaining horrible defects. Think of it as a significantly weaker human species. And as a human, we always strive to evolve, not devolve. And what if two gay men, which inbreeding is not applicable? And I strongly think that it is about principles. You can't say no to one thing but say yes when certain conditions are met. It's easier to manage to ban incest altogether because if it was allowed, people are gonna try non-stop to find loopholes, which is bad. It's better to shun incest altogether than to try and find new ways to make it not illegal, which can cause chaos, confusion, and destruction of generations. Now we get into the main course, and this is when Mr. Moist's argument totally falls on itself. And remember the argument earlier that if all parties consent to it, it's perfectly fine to happen.
Do you believe that somebody can go through hormone therapy? Can they change their gender if they're a child?
I think that's totally fine as long as everyone is consenting, as you agree with.
There. That moment right there is when Sneako saw a hole in Mr. Charlie and immediately penetrated it. And remember the argument before? Mr. Moist actually echoed the same thing.
If everybody's consenting, if everybody's okay with it, if the parents are okay with it, if nobody's being harmed, if it's going to be okay, if they're both abiding by the rules and they're not hurting each other, why not?
Parents are okay with it, and you are okay with it. I think that's totally a familial decision to make. Yeah.
Okay.
If all party consents, why not? And he panicked and justified his take by saying that, oh, there's another party involved.
So if you have someone that's your age coming in saying, I want to marry that child, I don't think that can happen under any circumstance.
So,
no.
But it's still a personal decision. You're still deciding.
Because there's
take the other party out of the equation.
It's a
Well, it will not matter because the main point now is consent. And Mr. Moist is saying earlier that it's still not okay for a 17 to marry 25 because even with the consent of all individuals. But now he's saying that if all parties consent to transitioning, it's perfectly fine. So you see how the argument collapsed there?
personal.
It's not.
If I'm 16 and I personally want to marry this girl, she's beautiful. She's 21 years old. Her family wants to do it. My family wants to do it. You're saying I can't do that. We're both consenting. I'm ready to go. I'm physically mature, but I'm not allowed to marry because Moist says that woman's a pedophile. But if then the next day I leave it, I'm depressed, I want to cut my penis off, I can go right into the clinic, snip it off, and start taking HRT like Chris Tyson. That's a society that makes sense to you?
It is. I believe
okay.
everyone has I believe everyone has the right to do with their body what they want to do.
Because personally, if it's legal and all party consents to it, you do you. But Personally, I think it's wrong for a parent to consent to both marriage and transitioning for their children well before 21 and 18 because both are an extreme example of life-changing decisions, and I would want my children's rationale to be optimized when making those life-changing decisions. And this actually reminds me of the Ben Shapiro moment about the age and gender clip.
Let me ask you this. Okay, I won't ask you how old. I will ask you how old you are, okay? Because you're young enough that it's probably not insulting to ask you. So.
I'm 22, so I'm probably only naive, right?
No. Why aren't you 60? Why aren't you 60?
Because it.
And why can't you identify as 60? What is the problem with you identifying as 60?
It's not the same as gender. You can't just.
You're right. Age is significantly less important than gender.
Like, oh, why is it okay to snip meat off with consent and not marriage? Is transitioning less important than marriage? And that's Sneako's smoking gun, and he rammed that hard in Mr. Moist's butt cheeks. And that pretty much signals the end of the argument right there.
Do words need to have definitions?
Yes, and so does the age of consent.
When we use the English language, should the words that we use match the definition of the word?
Yes.
Yes, you're not doing that.
You don't want statutory. We won't use colloquialism.
There you go.
It's
So
statutory rape.
within this conversation, you change it.
Statutory.
And after that, Mr. Moist made the response to try and justify his take.
You can get therapy, you can go through the process of making that decision. I thought that's what it was. I thought he was just speaking in hyperbole with the dick cutting off. I thought that's what we were talking about. And then if you decide that's the path you want to take, it is your body, you can do that. You can make that decision once you become of age to make a decision like that. I just don't understand how it got so muddled. Half of the conversation was hyperbole, and apparently that one was literal. Or it's a very malicious attack on what I'm trying to say or misunderstanding. I don't know. But I think I'm just going to call it there. Alright, take it easy, have a good night. See ya.
Yeah, truly an awful moment because it's unfortunately still wrong, hyperbole or not. Because in gender transitioning, there's not really an age requirement for surgery. Though generally they recommend 18 years old, but like you said, if all party consents and the doctor said good to go, they will immediately snip a meat off because most doctors wouldn't mind to do it if the family is really sure about it. Plus, of course, it's money because as early as 13 years old, you can get assistance from your doctor to transition. So the rest of the debate circles around that same fallen argument, but either way, it's a horrible debate and the simple answer is a big NO to both of their arguments. So what do you guys think? That's all there is to it. Thanks for watching. Bye.